Hi, and welcome to Better Business Bureau serving Central Oklahoma and the State Chamber of Oklahoma's partnered webinar on policy and legislative changes in 2020 and 2021. We are so excited to partner with the State Chamber on this webinar three-part series, if you will. And for our first couple of sections, we are going to hear from Emily Crouch, Senior Vice President of Government Affairs. Emily, if you will tell us a little bit about you and what you do at the State Chamber.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having us. I'm excited to be here and for you guys to learn a little bit more about what we've been up to over this 6-month COVID period, especially related to session. Like Casey said, I'm Emily Crouch. I'm the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs for the State Chamber of Oklahoma. The State Chamber represents a variety of businesses across the state. Up at the state capitol, we are the voice for business on all public policy matters, as well as regulatory issues, and a voice for businesses in the courts as well. And so we have a unique insight, I think, to share with you guys today about what went on during the 2020 legislative session surrounding COVID and what was passed that could impact your business in the coming months and weeks and days ahead. So just glad to be here with you guys today, and thanks for the opportunity to film the segment.
Thank you so much, Emily. And as you mentioned, you talked through a couple of things that we'll cover in our sections today. The last section that we'll cover, we'll dive into more of the resource side of things, what the State Chamber is offering and how you can connect with them. So we're really excited to get into that. So without further ado, I think we start off with our first section. We want to know all of the changes that happened during this session. So Emily, why don't you start off and give us an overview of big changes that happened and really take us down the road of what policy changes and developments that business owners should really know about.
Yeah, let me set the stage a little bit. So in a normal year, we would be at the Capitol about February 1st through the last Friday in May, pretty much all day, every day up there defending business. COVID hit around spring break time here in Oklahoma. So imagine that timeline not being exactly as I described it. Around that March 15th, 16th, 17th timeframe, they pretty much shut the Capitol down to the public. And so myself and my team were not able to get up to the Capitol and do what we do on a daily basis, which is build relationships with legislators, talk about priorities for business, and help protect business from maybe harmful or hurtful legislation. And so we turned what we usually do in person into phone calls and text messages and emails, and sending up any kind of signal we could from our dining room tables to talk with legislators and elected officials about the priorities of business. And those priorities for business obviously shifted. What we cared about in February, whether it was for our jobs or just our personal lives, really shifted in March. And so a couple of the really big changes that I want to talk about today that happened during session were setting up protections for businesses for legal liabilities that are related to COVID-19. And then as well, there was a temporary pause on certain unemployment insurance tax increases that could happen to business in a normal year, but because of COVID, there's some additional protections in place. So those are two really big things that I think our viewers today might want to make sure they're listening intently for.
I think you touched on this a little bit. After we all saw what COVID could do to our world and what it did to our marketplace, I think we realized that we weren't exactly prepared for going all completely virtual. We learned a lot about new technology and all of those things. On the flip side of that, the State Chamber really advocates for businesses and families and students to try and get access for better broadband and internet access. So tell me, Emily, take us down that path. What is the State Chamber doing to advocate for that?
Now more than ever, we're all realizing how important our connection is to others, and broadband is really the vehicle that allows that. So that access is extremely important for businesses, regardless of industry. It helps create efficiencies. It helps us do our general day-to-day. It helps us do these types of meetings and gatherings for productivity. You name it. It's important. And so what we're advocating for is to make sure that all corners of the state have adequate broadband access and that they're connecting to it. So want to mention one thing the legislature did this session that we are continuing to advocate for and help them with. They are studying the broadband access throughout rural Oklahoma, what you and I have here in urban Oklahoma City versus maybe what our friends out in Western Oklahoma or far southeastern Oklahoma or the Panhandle may have. It's really different. And so making sure that we're aware of where the coverage gaps exist, studying those, and then determining why they exist, how we can fix them, and then identifying some policy recommendations to partner the public and private sector to make sure that broadband access grows. So we're going to be advocating for some really thoughtful discussions with the legislature on this that incentivize the private sector to get involved. You can't build Wi-Fi, internet access, broadband overnight. And so it's going to take some careful thought and consideration. So we're really grateful that the legislature is working on this, is studying it this year. It was something that they were talking about doing before COVID hit. And then when COVID hit, it was kind of just a no-brainer. Yes, we're going to convene this group. Yes, we're going to have a discussion. And I'm really hopeful that in 2021, we'll see some policy recommendations from them on how, if this ever happens in the future, hopefully it doesn't, we'll be prepared and make sure that broadband is ready and in every home. I mean, we've got some great providers across our state that were making sure that students that needed it, that didn't have it, who couldn't go to their school every single day, had very affordable access within their homes. But that's kind of a band-aid to the current emergency situation we're in, and we really need to find ways to help the public and private sector come together to grow that access. So we're hopeful, but we know it's a long road.
Thank you for that. I know that I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the upcoming year. Speaking of that, I want to know what plans, other than it sounds like that might come up, what other plans is coming up in 2021? What does the legislator have slated?
Great question. And they're in the development process for their agendas as well, just as we are. And so I wish I had a crystal ball. What I can guess that I think is pretty accurate, because COVID kind of commandeered our session. There was a lot of leftover topics that kind of got put aside as lower priorities during the pandemic that we expect will come back up. And so it'll be a busy year because all the new ideas that come to them in 2021, as well as those they weren't able to accomplish in 2020. In a given year, the governor signs 400 to 500 new laws into place. This year he signed about 150 to 160. So we're missing a few hundred in there. So we expect 2021 to be busy. A couple that we'll be looking out for is modernizing the unemployment system. This was something that needed to happen before COVID hit. And we know now it will for sure happen in 2021 and beyond. It's not a one-year fix, that's for sure. We didn't get here overnight. But improving technology there at the agency to help individuals who are filing for unemployment get their benefits and their checks in a more timely manner. I think if you're living in Oklahoma and you flipped on the news any day over the last 6 months, you've seen that there's been some delays there. They've got some new leadership there that is working day and night to fix that, and so we're happy about that. But on the other side, employers are the ones that pay those unemployment taxes to make sure that the unemployment insurance trust fund, which is where all your unemployment taxes go to sit for a rainy day when someone does have to file unemployment, they are the responsible party for keeping those unemployment taxes and then also alerting employers when a claim has been filed against them. Supposed to set up an appeals process for employers to have that engagement process. That system is really antiquated, and it's extremely hard for businesses to navigate. And so we're hopeful that those technology upgrades will make it a more user-friendly system down the road. So definitely modernizing the unemployment system. And then I think Unfortunately, because of COVID and because of our low energy prices in Oklahoma, but across the country, we're going to see a revenue shortage in the coming year. And so I think the legislature is going to start to look at various tax incentives to determine their viability. How often are they used? Are they helping grow jobs in the state? What's the return on investment? And what's the cost to the state? Obviously, a tax incentive is essentially an exemption from a tax sometimes, or it's a reimbursement back to a business or an individual. And so they're going to start to look at those and determine what are they doing for the state, and can we afford them in a year where we might have less money than we expect. So those are two big ones that I really am preparing myself for. And then the other ones, only time will tell. You never know. We're living in a different world now, and so we'll be keeping our ear to the ground to make sure we're up to speed on them.
Something that we get a lot of questions about, and we know that you all advocate for and have some more information on, is the PPP Loan Program. So tell us about the current updates on that. We get a lot of questions from our businesses, our accredited businesses, and our community.
Yeah, well, it's a big program, and I think it's helped a lot of Oklahoma businesses. So I understand why you're getting those questions. We're getting them as well. We're passing a lot of those questions along to the financial experts at our banking and credit union institutions because they know far better. But here's what I can tell you. Congress obviously approved the Paycheck Protection Program earlier this spring. To date, it's offered over $520 billion to businesses across the country, to 4.8 million loan recipients. So it did exactly what Congress intended it to do. This is not a political statement, but I would have to say pretty successful that it got into the hands of people so quickly. So way to go, Congress. They probably don't get too much credit all the time. The loans range from under 50,000 up, some of them were over 5 million, but the average size loan was about $107,000. And so targeted really to those small businesses in need, and intended to support the retention of jobs. What the SBA can tell us to date is that 51 million jobs were supported or protected under this program, which is just phenomenal. I mean, with all the fear that we had around that March 15th timeframe to where we are today, to imagine 51 million jobs being gone today would just, it would be a completely different world for the United States. So grateful that Congress was able to provide that. The program is temporarily on hold though. So Congress authorized it to be in existence until August 8th. So lenders can't take an application for the PPP right now. However, Congress is expected to take up another COVID relief bill before the end of the year. Fingers crossed. I just gave them a shout out, so maybe they're listening and they'll do something before the end of the year. And we think they're going to make some tweaks to the program. One, targeted relief to small businesses who were hit the hardest, even if they got a PPP loan already, potentially getting to go back and maybe get another support line of credit from that program. I think it's really, really important for viewers to understand, if they did get a PPP, that they have read the forgiveness guidance forwards and backwards. And it is wonky and confusing. And so I highly encourage you to talk to your banker or to your credit union that you applied through, to make sure that you understand that guidance, because that's a significant piece of this loan for some people. If it's a forgivable grant, in essence, you don't have to pay it back, and you've been given an opportunity to maintain your business. So I can share with you a guide that our counterparts at the U.S. Chamber put together that I think is pretty user-friendly. So I will send that over and make sure that you guys have it available to you. But I think that forgiveness piece is super important. And then we expect, if Congress does take up another relief bill, maybe a tweak that they will make to the program would be some eligibility requirements. Currently, 501c6 organizations, which are typically trade associations, chambers of commerce like us, real estate boards, boards of trade, other 501c6 tax exempt organizations that are devoted to improving business conditions, is the quote that I have here in my notes. They would potentially be eligible for PPP. And so that could be significant for a lot of communities across our state, across the country. But I think from our perspective here at the State Chamber, we know of a lot of local C6 organizations that exist in all corners of the state that do a lot for each of their local communities who aren't eligible today. And so we're hopeful that that'll be a tweak made to the program in the future. So $520 billion out the door in record time. I'm impressed. So Oklahoma received 5.4 billion of that. So I think we've also got to give some credit to our financial institutions as well, because they did some yeoman's work to make that happen as quickly as they did.
Great, Emily. So to wrap up, can you give us an overview of what we discussed today and resources that the State Chamber offers and where businesses can find those resources?
Yeah, so we provide that on a weekly and bi-monthly basis to our members. We also have great information resources available to us from the U.S. Chamber. They're really, really in tune with what's going on the congressional level. But our website, okstatechamber.com, can provide that information. And then you've got my contact information too, so feel free to share that with the viewers as well.